Palestinians are a stateless nation, and the occupation has been chronic. It took 66 years so far. And I think in addition to the military and economic and concrete occupation that's taking place over land and air and borders and everything, the system of the occupation is trying to occupy the Palestinian mind, in which the Palestinians start looking at Israelis as superior, better, their hospitals are better, their education system is better, and start developing self-loathing toward themselves, seeing themselves as less beings and as inferior, as being habituated to legitimize themselves, to prove themselves as innocent all the time. And this is the worst level that might happen to Palestinians, to occupy their mind, to let them internalize the occupation and start self-censoring them, doing the censoring and the accusation for themselves, because they have been exposed to this attack to their personhood for so long. 20% of the Palestinian population have been arrested. This is a common experience. And when people are arrested, torture and maltreatment is common. It happens to almost all the people who are arrested. And torture is designed to break a person psychologically, and by that changes the family structure. When a man is imprisoned for 10 years or 15 years, he leaves home when the children are very young. He comes back to his home and sees that the young boy became the father of his family. The Palestinian society is very focused, is very family oriented and focused on education. Palestinians have a very high literacy rate and years of education in comparison to people in the Arab region. Many Palestinians see education as a very important tool for steadfastness and perseverance and resilience to continue living in dignity and decency in this situation under occupation. I think that the Palestinian family is being targeted. And I explained torture as one tool to target, to change the structure of the family, but also the system of the strategy of creating collaborators among the Palestinians. This also breaks the social cohesion and the structure, the social and family structure within Palestinians. And also the spirituality, because people, regardless of their religion, of their organized religion, they believe in the right to continue living in this land. Many people see that the right to resist and maintain their living in this land, not only a right, not only a humanitarian right that is granted by the international law, but also a duty, a spiritual duty. And those are important elements in helping Palestinians to continue living in spite of the difficulties. In the West, you will see people searching for food in the garbage. This thing you will never see in Palestine. In spite of all home demolition, you will see people in the West sleeping in the street. This you will never see in Palestine, because social cohesion and family structure are important. So once the attack on Gaza took place, there were a lot of propaganda and calls for hatred and incitement in the air. For example, a parliament member, Ayelet Shaked, she said that we should kill Palestinian women because it is those women who send their sons for death with flowers and kisses. And she said we should demolish Palestinian homes because it is in these homes that the little snakes, the little serpents, grow. And we heard also an academic person from Bar Ilan University, Professor Mordechai Kedar. He said that the only thing that deters a Palestinian terrorist from doing an attack against Israelis is that when he knows that his wife and his sister and his wife will be raped. These calls for killing, there were other rabbis who also issued like teachings that Palestinian children can be also targeted and killed. So this kind of incitement paved the way and prepared some Israelis to organize themselves in groups to attack Palestinians. And this is not new to the Israeli society. There were always settlers' attacks against Palestinians in areas like Nablus and Hebron. But to have these attacks happen in Jerusalem is something new, I would say. And the attack on this boy, the kidnapping and killing of the boy, came as one of the results of this growing incitement and growing calls for hatred in the air. And the massive killing of Palestinians, the bombardment of homes with the children and the elderly and the women in the homes, came also in reaction to these calls for incitement and hatred. During the latest war, for example, the latest attack on Gaza, we heard world politicians talking about Israel's right to self-defense, as if it is the Palestinians who are occupying Israel, not the other way around. And there is so much unrecognition and devalidation that is given to Palestinians through such statements. During that time, also, we saw people in Europe, in Spain, in France, in Latin America, in South Africa, in Britain, demonstrating to support Palestinians, on the behalf of Palestinians. And there is a very important message in that, because those people are telling Palestinians, we see you, we hear you, we recognize your pain, we validate your narrative, and this is very important for recovery. There is a very important psychological support, psychological steadfastness that can be given to Palestinians. This is more important than the psychological techniques. This is much better than sending professionals and people who will come and help Palestinians learn relaxation techniques and so on. I do not underestimate the importance of the psychological solidarity, but we need also to think about ways to make this solidarity politically effective at preventing another murder against Palestinians, another massacre against Palestinians. When we see a woman being raped, for example, so the rapist is the perpetrator of that severe trauma that she went through, but the silent bypasser, the bypasser who is in consent, who doesn't object to what is happening, is also siding with the perpetrator, and this is also traumatizing for her. So the role of the bypasser is very important, and the international community is the witness, is the bypasser. If we will believe that the other is bad, the other is against us, and the world is an unjust place, this will lead us to misery, and this will lead us to violence and extremism. When you look at some of the pictures in Gaza, you can see that you can guess that there was an earthquake there. But war has worse effects than an earthquake, because war damages your point of view and the belief system of the people, and that's why it is more dangerous. The Palestinians who are living in the occupied territories are 1/3 of the whole Palestinian nation. 2/3 of the Palestinians are expelled out of Palestine because their homes and land were taken by force. So this story of dispossession and ruining of Palestinian homes and confiscation of their lands is an integral part of a collective trauma that happened to the Palestinian nation, and it is repetitive. It repeated itself many times over the last 66 years. And the trauma is transgenerational, like our grandparents were expelled out of their land in 48, but our parents lived the war of 67 with more loss, more humiliation, more confiscation of their properties. And we see events like the latest events in Gaza, where homes are again demolished and land is, people are displaced out of their land. Lower level of daily humiliation and oppression, in which every time if you want to go out of our home, we are exposed to, we need to pass checkpoints, we need to legitimize ourselves to Israelis, show our papers, prove that we are innocent residents of the country. We are always checked, the boots of our cars are checked. We are always suspects. When we want to travel abroad at airports, people are asked to undress and checked every time for the security of Israel. And this long life of repetitive traumatic events and lower doses of daily humiliation and oppression damages the Palestinian well-being. So much of the help depends on the meaning that people give to their experience. So some people go through extreme traumatic events and they construct and reconstruct a meaning for that experience. They integrate it somehow in their personal narrative and in the collective narrative in a way that is more acceptable. And they manage to face trauma like that. And so much of the healing depends on the subjective experience and the inner resources of that person. In the absence of resilience and resistance and steadfastness and national unity, when our authorities try to silence Palestinians and to participate in their oppression, this spontaneous reaction that should be directed against the occupation will be directed towards easier victims. And in homes, we have the easier victims. We have women and children. So if a man is humiliated at a checkpoint, but because of for example, at a certain point, the Palestinian police was preventing the Palestinians from making demonstrations against Israelis. So when people experience extreme oppression, extreme humiliation, and they cannot express it, they cannot stand against it, they take that humiliation and frustration home, and they try to make up for their losses and defects in their ego, in their well-being, in their personal integrity, by displacing their anger at easier victims, harming their women, abusing their children. And it is very important to observe these phenomena and provide people with proper answers. And the leadership is can play a very important role in maintaining the social cohesion of the Palestinian people and minimizing creating appropriate outlets for the expression of frustration and anger, appropriate outlets in which our institutions can be democratized and reformed, and we can be provided with effective tools to resist and to resist non-violently and respond to the occupation in an effective way. Murderous attack against Palestinians, silence from the international community, and the Palestinian belief in peace talks is becoming less important, and their belief that in support of the resistance is getting more important. Palestinians are convinced now that it is resistance that makes Israel stop its attack against Palestinians. It's the Palestinian resistance, not diplomacy, unfortunately. And when we talk about resistance, I'm not talking about armed resistance only. I'm talking about a wide spectrum of resistance. Resistance is important for the Palestinian people to achieve liberation. It was important for many other nations. Many other nations achieved their liberation because of resistance. This happened in Algeria, in Ireland, in many other places in the world. So why not for Palestinians? Now, it is another question that Palestinians need to revisit and reform their resistance options. We also should not ignore the fact that international support has been used to create polarization among Palestinians. You know, the Palestinians had their elections in 2006, and the international community rebuffed the result of our elections, and they provided support, financial support and political support to one party against the others, and that one party did not represent the elected majority of the people. Again, this was a damage for the point of view of the Palestinians. This was a harm for the core belief, for the belief system of Palestinians. And because the Palestinians are bribed by their salaries and their income, they are tied with the international support, so it was an effective tool to bring fragmentation and polarization among Palestinian people. And this was very harmful. So I think that the international support, the so-called international support, takes more responsibility than our political parties in creating this polarization between Palestinian people. The Palestinian plight for liberation is a very just and noble cause. It happened that we are unlucky because we are occupied by Israelis, and the Israelis have the traumatic history of the Holocaust, and this traumatic history of the Holocaust is being industrialized to keep the world in silence, to play on the guilt feeling of Europe. And this is prolonging the agony of the Palestinian nation.